You called it variance. Math calls it a donation. The guy with 7 deuce offsuit called you 3-bet. He caught 2 pair on the river and he stacked you. You walked to your car, maybe grabbed a drink, and you told yourself, that's just poker, that's variance. I played it right. There's nothing I could do. That's a story that feels true. It even sounds kind of sophisticated, like you've graduated past results-oriented thinking, like you understand the long game. But here's what's actually happening. You're using the language of discipline to protect the deeply undisciplined decision-making process. And the market, the table, the ecosystem, the long-term expected value of every single chip you've ever put into the pot, that market does not care about your narrative. It only cares about whether the math was right or wrong. That's it. This is Vinton Poker, precision in, profits out. And the topic of today's short talk is why losing to bad players isn't just bad luck. It's a pricing error. I'm Vinton. I specialize in one thing, transforming everyday players into highly profitable exploitative forces at the live table. If you're tired of break-even sessions and are ready to engineer a consistent income stream, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. So let's talk about what's actually going on when a loose, non-folding player cracks your hand. Because most of you are misdiagnosing the problem entirely, and the misdiagnosis is costing you real money session after session in ways you're not even tracking. The first thing you need to understand is that loose players, the ones who call everything, the ones who refuse to fold bottom pair, the ones who chase gut shots with zero pot odds, these players are not your enemy. They're your primary revenue source. They are the market inefficiency you exist to exploit. The problem isn't that they sometimes win. Of course, they win sometimes. The problem is that most of you don't actually know how to adjust your strategy to extract maximum value from them. You're running the same playbook against a calling station that you run against a thinking, range-aware opponent. And that's a structural error. That's a leak. When you get your money in as an 80% favorite, you're going to lose that pot 20% of the times. 1 in 5. If you're playing a reasonable volume of hands, that 1 in 5 times outcome is going to cluster sometimes. You're going to lose 3 or 4 of those in a row sometimes. That's not the universe punishing you. That's just what 20% probability looks like when you run it enough times. The $1,800 swing from an expected profit to actual loss in a single pot, that's variance doing exactly what variance does. It's not a signal, it's noise. But here's where self-delusion enters. When you mislabel a genuinely negative EV decision as variance, you've done something catastrophic. You've locked the leak in permanently. You've told your brain that the call was fine, the decision was sound, nothing there is here to fix. And you make that same error next week and the week after that, and you keep subsidizing the pool while wondering why the graph won't climb. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know if you lost because of variance or because of some pricing error? You run your call through a decision engine, not emotionally, but clinically. When you're facing a river bet from a loose, non-folding player, someone your PIPO read has identified as a pure value-heavy range in this spot, the question isn't could he be bluffing? The question is, how often does he need to be bluffing for this call to break even? And then you compare that number to what you actually know about this specific opponent's tendencies. Here's the math. If the villain bets half pot, you're getting roughly 3-1 on your call. That means you need to be good approximately 25% of the times just to break even. That's the price. Now, does this specific player, the one who's been calling everything and showing down the nuts, does he bluff the river with enough frequency to make up 25% of his range in this betting spot? If you're honest, your PIPO informed answer is no. The call is negative EV. Full stop. It doesn't matter that you had top pair. It doesn't matter that you'd been running bad. The math says fold, and the market will reward you for folding over time, even though it feels like weakness in the moment. Now let's flip it, because this is where most players leave enormous money on the table against loose opponents, and they don't even realize it. The same player who refuses to fold, the calling station, the recreational player who just wants to see cards, is the player you need to be value betting relentlessly and mercilessly. Against a standard thinking opponent, you might check back a thin second pair hand on the river to control the pot. Against a non-folding player, that's a mandatory bet because his calling range is so wide, so inelastic, that even your marginal hands are printing money as value bets. Think about what that means structurally. Against a player who calls down with any pair, any piece of the board, any draw that misses, your value betting threshold drops dramatically. Hands that are barely profitable bets against a competent opponent become highly profitable plus EV bets against this player type. You're not bluffing. You're not running an elaborate line. You're just pricing your hand correctly against someone who has told you through their behavior exactly what they're going to do. And yet, most players don't do this. Why? Two reasons: ego and fear. The ego part: you want to make the sophisticated play. You want to check back and look like you're pot controlling with a reason. The fear part: you don't want to bet and get raised because then you have to make a harder decision. So you default to passivity. And against a non-folding player, passivity is one of the most expensive leaks in your game. You're leaving value on the table every single time you check back a hand that beats most of their calling range. Here's an example to cement this in your mind. If you bet $200 into $300, your bluff needs to work roughly 40% of the time for this to be immediately profitable. 200 divided by 500, that's your break-even percentage. Now ask yourself, against a player who refuses to fold, against someone who your read tells you he has a wide, sticky calling range, is it realistic to expect 40% folds? Probably not. So what does that tell you? Stop bluffing the calling station. It's not a clever play. It's a capital misallocation. You're paying for folds that aren't coming. The adjustment against a non-folding player is actually very simple, even if it requires discipline to execute. You bluff less, you value bet more, and you value bet thinner. You size up when you have it because they're calling you anyway and you want to maximize the pot. You stop running multi-street bluffs against opponents who have demonstrated that they don't have the folding frequency that justifies the risk. And when you lose a big pot to one of these players, when he calls your value bet with a dominated hand and catches a two-outer, you don't call it variance and move on. You review the decision. Was the bet plus EV? If yes, you log it as a correct play and you don't let the outcome corrupt your process. That's the core of what my book, The Poker Delusion, calls a surgical analysis. Review the decision, not the outcome. Was your call plus EV based on the information available at the time against that opponent's likely range? That's the only question that matters. Not did I win the pot? That's a results-oriented question. The market doesn't care. The market asks, were you right about the math? And if you were right about the math and you lost, that's variance. You endure it with discipline. You protect your bankroll and you outlast it. But if you were wrong about the math, if you called the river bet from a tight, value-heavy player because you felt like he might be bluffing, even though your read gave you no evidence of that, and you lost, that's not variance. That's a donation with a story attached to it. Most players can't tell the difference. And that inability to distinguish between the two is the most expensive cognitive error in poker. Because if you can't diagnose the source of your losses accurately, you can't fix anything. You're just guessing. You're applying variance as a universal absolution for every bout outcome. And in doing so, you're insulating every real leak from scrutiny. Now, here's something that I want you to sit with for a second, because this is where it might get a little uncomfortable. The loose player who keeps beating you, he's not a problem. You're subsidizing him because your strategy against him is broken. You're either over bluffing into his calling range, or you're undervalue betting because you're afraid of the action, or you're making hero calls because you can't accept that he actually has it sometimes. Every one of these errors is a wealth transfer from your stack to his. The correct posture against a non-folding player is almost boring in its simplicity. You have a hand, you bet it, size appropriately for value. Don't bluff without a clear, quantifiable reason to believe he'll fold at the frequency required. And when he catches his miracle card and beats you, you nod, you note the decision, and you execute the same play next time without hesitation, because the long run is real. And the long run belongs to the player who makes correct decisions, not the player who makes correct outcomes. If you want to know exactly where your game is leaking, not the bad beat stories, but the actual structural errors, the spots where you're consistently making negative EV decisions and calling them variance, take the free LeakHunter Diagnostic assessment. The link is in the description below, or go to audit.vintonpoker.com. It's a ruthless audit of your game, and it will show you precisely where your capital is bleeding out. Most players are losing money in spots they think they're winning. The diagnostic will tell you the truth. The players who lose non-folding opponents consistently are not the players who run better. They're not luckier. They're the players who have correctly identified what the market is offering and priced their decisions accordingly. When a calling station sits down at your table, it's not a threat. It's a revenue event. The only question is whether your strategy is calibrated to extract that revenue efficiently or not. Loose players have a predictable failure mode. They overvalue their hand equity. They underestimate their range strength, and they call in spots where the math says fold. That's a gift. Your job is to present them with the correct price. Value bets, they can't resist. Bluffs, you don't make. And the pot sizes that forces them to pay maximum when they're behind. And when the short-term variance goes against you, when the two-outer hits, when the miracle river arrives, you call it a 20% event in a mathematically sound process. You zoom out, you see the sample size, you protect your bankroll, and you come back to the table with the same cold, calibrated approach, because the approach is the only thing that produces consistent results over time. The short term is a liar. The math is not. And if you want the full masterclass, the 4 pillars, the decision engine, the complete PIPO framework for turning every session into a calibrated extraction, that's all inside the masterclass. Link below in the description, or go to vintonpoker.com/course. Everything is structured, everything is sequenced, and it's built specifically for the players who are done guessing and are ready to operate with precision. Question for you to ponder. The last time you lost a big pot to a loose player, did you actually review whether your decision was plus EV, or did you just call it variance and forget about it? Tell me your answers in the comments below. I read them all. And if you want to keep improving and crushing, watch this next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future episodes. Your support helps this channel grow, and it means a lot to me. If you got value from this episode, give it a like and share it with someone who's also serious about leveling up and becoming a crusher just like you. Want more strategy, structure, and tools that actually work? Head over to vintonpoker.com and join my free newsletter. I'm Vinton, and I'll see you in the next episode.